Hello, I'm making this video for my online class, Digital Literacy and Cultural Change, in response to an article I read on the website hybridpedagogy.com entitled Technology 101, What do we need to know about the future we're creating? Fundamentally, this is a representing of a 1998 article that was the start of a 5-part series that ultimately asks the question, is it possible to think critically about technology without running off to the woods? The more I thought about that question, the more I wondered if I was indeed avoiding technology instead of finding ways to actively embrace it. So here's my attempt to consider the history of the author, the points to be made in the work, and my own intersection with all of it. Howard Rheingold has written over a dozen books regarding technology and the human condition, and has contributed to this discourse, as Britannica.com puts it, the intersection between human consciousness, creative activity, and new technologies. In 1984, he helped to popularize the term virtual community, which later became the title of his 1991 book, and with that work, he became a leading commenter on cyberspace in general and the notion of online communities in particular. In his career, he has created several technology-focused websites, taught at Stanford University and UC Berkeley, won a MacArthur Grant, and continues to this day to comment on the human experience and the impact that technology has upon it. 1998 was looking down the barrel of what many perceived to be one of the first major technological concerns of the computer age, Y2K. The idea was that a computer's internal clock did not understand when on December 31st, 1999, the new year, century, millennia, which actually would start in 2001, the rollover into the year 2000 would be read as 1900 and crash computers and the internet worldwide. But as we all know, that did not happen. However, in 1998, we were introduced to the iMac, and the little thing that we like to call Google was founded. That was 10 years before the smartphone and 7 years before this very platform, YouTube. AI was mostly considered science fiction, as was cloud computing and even streaming services. I was in the transitioning years from my pager and hadn't even acquired my first mobile phone yet. I'd only been out of high school for a few years and was still trying to figure out the world as it was quickly changing around me. It would be another 2 years before I even had a job that interacted regularly with a computer. And by that point, no one I personally had known had one in their own home. I came from an era that saw technology as something to be feared as much as something to be used. The Terminator films had us worrying about the future, and The Matrix, which would be released the following year, had us worrying about our own reality. It was an uncertain time as the average individual could finally start to imagine the potential impact that digital technologies would have on our lives. As Reingold's article was brought to us as part of our reading curriculum, it was associated with a different article, Is It Okay to Be a Luddite?, written in 2014 by Sean Michael Morris and Jesse Stommel. They were somewhat inspired by an essay from Thomas Pynchon, who wrote about the Luddites in 1800s Britain that were organizing to destroy technology that was replacing their way of life. In this article, they talk about people who shun social media, like me, and do not think favorably of the internet. Ironically for this course, they mention how many people look to the internet as the downfall of modern education, decrying learning as subpar, and that it could never replace face-to-face teaching. One of the authors described this as digital agnosticism. Their article was written 15 years after Rheingold's and has the perspective of some of a life being lived with the interface of technology. But even those years had not answered many of the questions that Rheingold asked. The concerns were still valid, and the fears still present. Rheingold was born into a world that was a product of the Second Industrial Revolution. This was a time of vast technological progress that produced significant changes in how goods were produced and how people lived and worked. The widespread use of electricity was a key component and helped improve techniques for mass production and communication innovations. The production of steel increased dramatically, fueling a construction boom, and advancements in transportation meant the world moved faster and connected more directly. Rheingold's parents were of the generation that not only saw mankind's first flight, but also saw humans land on the moon. That example is emblematic of the speed at which technology exponentially moved forward, partially due to the evolution of digital technologies and what led to the next wave of advancements. I can remember a time when television was broadcast from analog signals. We didn't have the option to learn on computers until I was in high school. Telephone answering machines use magnetic tape to record voice messages. You had to rewind or fast forward to skip between them. Digital technology was not something I grew up with, and therefore have seen many iterations of. It was introduced to me rather than me to it. There's a healthy dose of cynicism that my generation has seemingly inherently had from that era into which we were born. So everything is taken with a bit of hesitation, especially of something that many of us did not have the training for during its inception. The roots of digital technology can be traced back to the development of the first mechanical computers, but these were large and primarily used for specialized tasks. In 1947, the invention of the transistor marked a significant turning point, which paved the way for smaller, more powerful, and energy-efficient computers. A few decades later, the late 70s and 80s witnessed the rise of personal computers, bringing computing power to individuals and small businesses. Culminating in the early development of the Internet, the 1990s saw the rise of World Wide Web, which made information accessible to the general public and further accelerated the digital revolution. This was followed by broadband internet, Wi-Fi, smartphones, and widespread usage of social media platforms, transforming how people live, work, and interact. The digital revolution has been a gradual yet accelerating process with advancements built upon each other to bring us to the digital world we inhabit today. In Rheingold's article, he asked three important questions. Where are we going? Do we want to go there? And is there anything we can do about it? He understood well the benefits that we have already received and mentions a few, such as nuclear power, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, and even organ transplants. He then rightly points out that today's technologies have put staggering amounts of power into the hands of billions of people. But what he doesn't immediately answer if that is a good thing or not. And for a long time, I would fall into the category of believing that it might not be a great idea because of how quickly advancements are happening. Does this really let us have the right amount of time to properly use these tools? Considering that we believe written language is only about 5,000 years old, how much have we evolved since then to understand the proper usage and impacts of the modern digital technology that is afforded to us? Rheingold points out that one of the things that makes technology dangerous is the way people forget where tools come from and what they're designed to do. He continues, we have forgotten, and we have been encouraged to forget, about the origins and provenance of fundamental thinking tools we all benefit from. Rationality, progress, democratic self-governance, and universal acceptance of the superiority of the scientific method to other ways of knowing. I feel like we are becoming accustomed to a don't worry about it society. We're growing accustomed to accepting and utilizing new technologies before we understand them or consider their consequences. Having the ability to engage with technology is something I still see as a benefit rather than a right. And because of that, I'm always hesitant when I use new technology to the point of sometimes never fully engaging with it. But after really considering the research for this article, I feel that is perhaps a luxury I should not indulge. Whether I engage with the world or not, it is changing, and it is up to me to understand the points of intersection I have with advancing digital technologies. I've never been afraid of said technologies, but I do fear that I could be left behind if I do not attempt to fully invest myself in these new developments. The Cambridge English Dictionary offers a simple definition of a tool as something that helps you do a particular activity. A fairly basic yet universal idea. Digital technology is a tool, but like any tool, it can be misused. Fire is one of the first tools that humans discovered, and it continues to help us and harm us to this day. Digital technologies often presented to us without our knowledge of their origins. We are shown new techniques or new implements that afford us change in the ways that we conduct our daily lives. And often without that historical knowledge, we are not given the context of what they were best designed to perform. So we are left to our own devices, pun intended, to figure it out as we go. And some great strides can come from that. Tools help us with art, science, learning, and advancing the human species. However, tools often are used to hold us back and inflict harm on one another. Nuclear energy is one of the excellent examples in which many people around the world power their homes and live with technology. But we often forget that some of its early advances were pursued in order to use that same science as a weapon. America rushed to split the atom so it could inflict the consequences of those physics on its enemies. But what should be most importantly taught to us is the value of the responsibility of tools and technology. Just because there's a dark web doesn't mean that the internet should be avoided. Understanding that we are all partially responsible for safely using digital technology should not keep us from engaging with it, me included. As our society continues to advance, our digital tools are linked to our online presence, or lack thereof. Many people engage online to enhance their personal branding or professional visibility, while others seek out real-time engagement and community building. Professionals and students have unprecedented access to performance metrics and analytics, which many use for career investment or personal monetization, which can turn passions into viable careers. However, there are many potential downsides to this, as people will encounter algorithmic bias and filter bubbles. There are many health implications, as constant exposure to curated content can lead to unrealistic expectations and comparisons. Individuals can form dependency on platform algorithms and shift their priorities to perform to certain content-inspired user engagement definitions. And lastly, we are all aware of the privacy concerns and data exploitation that happens on the internet due to our or others' lack of proper security measures. While digital tools offer unprecedented opportunities for personal and professional growth, they also necessitate a mindful approach to their use. This harkens back to Rheingold's 3 questions, and I think we all should be ever mindful of them, particularly the third one, which always leads us to consider our part in the interaction. Howard Rheingold's exploration of the humanistic search for meaning offers a critical lens through which to examine our contemporary technological landscape. In works like The Virtual Community and Smart Mobs, Rheingold delves into the ways digital technologies reshape human connection, community, and consciousness. His reflections provide historical context that contrasts sharply with the rapid, often unexamined integration of AI tools like ChatGPT into our daily lives. And to well illustrate that point, I have used ChatGPT to help me synthesize the talking points for this particular slide. Historically, the quest for meaning has been deeply rooted in humanistic traditions, philosophy, spirituality, and communal life. This search was characterized by introspection, dialogue, and a sense of shared purpose. In contrast, the advent of AI technologies like ChatGPT represents a significant shift in how we seek meaning. These tools offer instant access to information and can simulate human-like conversation, providing users with immediate responses to a wide array of queries. While this can enhance efficiency and accessibility, it also raises a question about the depth and authenticity of the connection we form through such interactions. Rheingold's concept of convivial tools is particularly relevant here. He draws on Ivan Illich's idea that tools should be empowered and promote human flourishing. However, he cautions that many digital platforms, including AI-driven ones, often prioritize engagement over meaningful interaction, potentially leading to superficial connections that lack the depth and authenticity. To reconcile these perspectives, Rheingold advocates for a more mindful and literate engagement of technology. Moreover, he emphasizes the importance of reclaiming control over communication technologies. Ultimately, he is warning us against the monopolization of digital spaces by powerful entities and encourages users to actively participate in shaping the digital environments they inhabit, fostering communities that are inclusive, ethical, and conducive to meaningful engagement. Which personally sounds like an awful lot of work to me, but that is the mindfulness that will result in beneficial spaces in which we might actually flourish in our digital technology, integrated society, as it now and could exist. Rheingold postulates that although our present crisis is so threateningly precise because it plays out on the physical plane, where our bodies and our culture live, it is a crisis of knowledge. He sees this as a lacking of crucial mental skill, our ability to balance our need for resources and expanding power and growth in energy consumption while considering our ecological, political, and economic needs. When coupled with industrial capitalism and a push for scientific knowledge, our lack of consideration for our environment has a dramatically negative impact on our living conditions. And I can see how he means the world for all people, considering where resources come from and the economic disadvantagement of maintaining consistent personal technological advancement. Essentially, the question of how much we need the next gadget is rarely informed by the true cost to our finances and certainly with minimal consideration to our environment. I wholeheartedly agree with these concerns. I grew up with Depression-era grandparents who held onto everything and tried to reuse it no matter how many times they needed to repair it. Our culture seems to be moving away from that mindset to a replacement-based economy. Very rarely are we able to do, or are even encouraged to hold on to our technology, and digital technology is all the more difficult for the end user to repair. So the focus becomes getting the newest, fastest, shiniest thing that is supposed to make our lives so much better. Rheingold's concern is that our desire for growth is outpacing our understanding for its management, and I feel like this is still a pertinent issue. Rheingold saw this as a problem that he synthesized with, we simply do not have a good method for thinking and making decisions about how to apply and not apply the powerful tools of rationality, the scientific method, reductionism, and the combination of logical and efficiency embodied by technology. He likens this to the issues that scientists of the 16th century had during the Enlightenment era. He saw their solutions as breaking all of the component issues into their summary parts and processing them scientifically. But he continued to state that just because we don't know how to think and make decisions about technology doesn't mean we are incapable of discovering a new method for thinking about it. Like him, I hope we have more widespread public discourse of the issues of digital technology in hope that we can together lead to a more conscious consumption and conscientious indulgence. Rheingold warned us that the assumption is that there's a rational solution to every problem should not lead us to mistake thinking together for rushing for a solution. To me, it sounds like he is both describing a problem and acknowledging his own part in it, and I think we can identify with that approach. Though I don't get a new phone every year, I do acquire one every few without thoroughly understanding all it takes from the design and manufacturing to when I open the box and power it up for the first time. We do need to be aware of the consequences as well as the benefits of technology, and in that awareness, we arrive hopefully to a place of more thoughtful purchasing. So where does that leave us? I think and hope that it puts us on the path of consideration in conjunction with adaptation. Just because we assume a new technology does not mean that we are ready for it. But in all of this thinking, I no longer believe that just because we are not ready for it, we should not engage with it. There's growth that needs to happen, and that cannot be done apart from technology. There's a learning curve that comes from interacting with these new tools, and I think if we are, as a civilization, more willing to walk before we run, we are far less likely to trip. The notion that we enslave ourselves to technology is still pertinent in my mind, however, and this work has given me time to consider just how much I stare into these black mirrors that we all welcome into our homes. As to paraphrase from earlier, a tool is there to help us with any activity. Rheingold reminds us all, I can see, that it is our job to reason why and how we use these tools. Thank you all to have reached this point in this video, and I will conclude by saying, as a gesture toward technology, this is the first time I've used any of this. I've never made a PowerPoint before. I've never uploaded to YouTube before. I have made video recordings before. But this is really an endeavor for me to branch out and to open up myself to the possibilities of what digital technology can offer. And historically, I would have said, up to this point, thankfully, I never have had to use them. But I've really realized through this process that I have only held myself back because of it. Thank you.